There are moments in baseball that don't make the highlight reel. Moments that happen between the lines, not on the scoreboard, not in the box score, but in the space between two players who are supposed to be on the same side. What happened in the 7th inning between Shohei Ohtani and Freddie Freeman was one of those moments. And when the truth came out, it changed the way people looked at the Dodgers clubhouse entirely. This is not a story about a loss. The Dodgers won. But sometimes, what happens inside a win is louder than the final score. The Dodgers entered the 7th inning with control of the game. The crowd at Dodger Stadium was relaxed. The bullpen was warming. The kind of inning where nothing is supposed to go wrong. But baseball has a way of turning comfort into chaos in a single pitch. There was a runner on base. A ball was put into play. And in the outfield, in the gap between communication and execution, something broke down. Freddie Freeman made a decision. It was his decision alone. And Shohei Ohtani, who had already read the play, who had already positioned himself, who had already called for it, was ignored. The ball dropped. Not physically. But something dropped in that moment. Something heavier than a baseball. Ohtani turned. His expression said everything before his voice did. Those words didn't come out softly. They didn't come out as a question between teammates calmly working through a miscommunication. They came out with fire behind them. Sharp. Direct. The kind of words that cut through stadium noise and land exactly where they're aimed. Ohtani looked at Freeman. 4 words. Short enough to be devastating. Why did you ignore me? People in the dugout heard it. People near the field heard it. And in the hours and days that followed, the baseball world heard it too. Freeman didn't respond immediately. He looked away for a brief second. Then he looked back. His jaw tightened. You could see it from a distance, the look of a man who knew he had made a mistake but hadn't yet decided how to carry it. The inning continued. The Dodgers held on. The scoreboard didn't collapse. But the moment had already happened. And in the Dodgers world, moments like that don't disappear. They follow you into the clubhouse. They follow you into the press conference room. They follow you into every question a reporter asks with that particular look in their eye. After the game, the Dodgers clubhouse had a specific kind of quiet. It wasn't the silence of a loss. It wasn't devastation. It was something more uncomfortable than that. It was the silence of people who had seen something they weren't sure how to talk about yet. When Freddie Freeman sat down in front of reporters, he looked like a man carrying a full bag. Not broken. Not apologetic in the dramatic sense. But aware. Deeply, quietly aware. A reporter asked about the 7th inning. About the miscommunication. About the play. Freeman took a breath. Not a long dramatic breath. Just the kind of breath a person takes when they're choosing their words carefully because they know that whatever they say next is going to matter. He said it was on him. He said the communication broke down. He said Ohtani had called for it. He said he heard it, and then he made his own read of the play and went with it instead. The reporter pushed. Asked him to explain. Freeman paused again. I thought I had the better angle. He said. I was wrong. 3 words at the end. Simple. No decoration. No excuse wrapped in technical language. Just the acknowledgement sitting there, flat on the table. But then came the part that nobody expected. Someone in the room brought up the ABC challenge. For those who don't follow the internal dynamics of the Dodgers communication system, the ABC challenge is a protocol. A signaling method developed within the team's defensive structure to eliminate exactly the kind of miscommunication that happened in the 7th inning. It's a system built for moments of ambiguity. Built for high-leverage situations. Built, in many ways, for players like Ohtani and Freeman, whose responsibilities on the field frequently overlap. And Freeman had not used it. The reporter asked why. Freeman's answer was not what anyone in that room expected to hear. He said he didn't use it because in that moment, he didn't think he needed to. He said the play felt clear to him. He said he made a judgment call. Then he stopped. And then, almost as if he was saying it to himself as much as to the room, he added something that landed harder than everything else. That was disrespectful to Shohei. The room shifted. Not dramatically. There was no gasp. No sharp intake of breath from every corner. But the energy changed. Because that word, disrespectful, wasn't a word anyone expected Freeman to use about himself, about his own decision, in relation to his teammate. Disrespectful. It meant something specific. It wasn't a slip. It wasn't overcorrection. It was Freeman saying, out loud, that ignoring Ohtani's call wasn't just a baseball mistake. It was a failure of respect. A failure to honor the communication of a teammate who had done everything right. That realization lived in the room for a long moment. To understand why Freeman's admission hit as hard as it did, you have to understand what Ohtani had already given to that game. He hadn't pitched that night. But he had been present in every inning in the way that only Ohtani can be present, as a hitter, as a base runner, as a presence that the opposing team spends hours in their film room trying to neutralize. By the time the 7th inning arrived, Ohtani had already produced. He had already contributed. He had already done what the Dodgers needed him to do. And then, in a moment that required nothing from him except that a teammate listen, a teammate didn't listen. That's where the anger came from. Not ego. Not selfishness. Not the frustration of a superstar who felt overlooked. It came from a player who had read the play correctly, communicated clearly, and then watched the result of being ignored unfold in real time in front of him. The anger made sense. The 4 words made sense. Why did you ignore me? Dave Roberts didn't avoid the conversation. He never does. That's not his style. And in a situation like this, with 2 of his most important players, with a moment that had been seen and heard and was already circulating, silence would have been worse than anything he could say. Roberts entered the press area with the look of a manager who had already had the harder conversation in private. Whatever was said in the clubhouse between Ohtani and Freeman, between Roberts and Freeman, between Roberts and Ohtani, that had already happened. What remained was the public version of it. A reporter asked him directly about the 7th inning. Roberts nodded. He didn't flinch. That was in the 7th inning. He said. His voice was even. Controlled. The kind of control that takes experience to achieve. We'll handle it. But then he said something more. He said the moment was not going to define this team. He said communication breakdowns happen in baseball. He said the response to the breakdown matters more than the breakdown itself. And then, with a slight pause that felt intentional, he said this. Shohei had every right to be upset. 5 words. But they were 5 words from a manager that completely validated what his best player had felt and expressed in the middle of a live game. Roberts wasn't throwing Freeman under the bus. He was making something clear. That on this team, communication is not optional. That when Shohei Ohtani calls for a ball, you listen. Not because of his contract. Not because of his fame. Because he had earned that trust. Because he had done the work. Because in that play, in that moment, he was right. Later, after Roberts had spoken, Freeman was asked one more time. Not about the play. Not about the ABC challenge. But about Ohtani specifically. The reporter asked, "How is your relationship with Ohtani after this?" Freeman took longer this time. He placed both hands flat on the table in front of him. He looked directly at the reporter. And he answered without looking away. He said Ohtani had come to him after the inning. Not to continue arguing. Not to make it a bigger moment than it needed to be. But to say one thing clearly, next time, trust the call. Freeman said he understood. He said he told Ohtani that. Then he said something that closed the room down completely. You don't get many teammates in your career who see the game the way he does. I wasted one of those moments tonight. I won't waste another one. On the surface, this was a miscommunication in the 7th inning of a game the Dodgers won. A play that didn't cost them the game. A moment that will not show up in the final standings. But underneath it was something that matters far more than any single play. It was a test of how this team handles internal conflict. How they handle accountability. How they handle the weight of having a player like Shohei Ohtani, a player whose standard for preparation, execution, and communication is so high that any gap feels like a fault line. Ohtani didn't stay quiet. He could have. He could have let the moment pass, swallowed the frustration, and moved on without saying a word. He didn't. Because silence in that moment would have been its own kind of disrespect, to the game, to the standard, to himself. And Freeman didn't deflect. He could have. He could have leaned on baseball language, talked about tough reads and split-second decisions, and made it sound like a technical error with no human weight to it. He didn't. He called it what it was. Roberts didn't minimize it. He could have stood at that microphone and said it was handled internally and left it at that. Instead, he validated the frustration of his best player and made it clear what the expectation is on this team. That's not drama. That's accountability. And on a team trying to win a championship, accountability is the foundation that holds everything else up. Not for the dropped communication. Not for the sharp words between two teammates. It will be remembered because of what came after. Because of how three men, a furious superstar, a humbled veteran, and a steady manager, handled a moment that could have fractured something important. The Dodgers won the game. But what happened in the 7th inning, and everything that followed, might matter more when October arrives. Because championships aren't built in the easy innings. They're built in the moments when something goes wrong, when words are said in anger, when accountability is required, and the team doesn't flinch. On this night, the Dodgers didn't flinch. And Shohei Ohtani made sure of it.